Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Simon Shieh and Codjoe with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Simon's newest poetry collection, Master. But before we get started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First off, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk, Simon will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. Lastly, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Master online using the link in the live stream description. Now let's get into this. Simon's debut poetry collection dives headfirst into overcoming childhood trauma, reckoning with toxic masculinity, and learning to identify pain and heal through the darkness of memory and dreams. It has dazzling reviews from Terrence Hayes and Sherwin Bitsui, among many others, and it's truly such a treat to wrap up a fantastic year of events with these two authors here with us tonight. Simon Shieh is the author of Master, selected by Terrence Hayes for the Catherine A. Morton Prize. He has lived in upstate New York and Beijing, China, where he co-founded Spittoon Literary Magazine, which translates the best new Chinese writing into English. From 2008 to 2014, he competed as an amateur and professional Muay Thai fighter in China, Brazil, Argentina, Thailand, and the US. His poetry has been recognized with a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship and a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. He lives in the U.S. here with his wife, Charlotte, and their dog, Momo. As I mentioned earlier, Codjoe joins Simon in conversation tonight. Is the author of Bluest Nude, finalist for the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Poetry and the Patterson Poetry Prize, and Blood of the Air, winner of the Drinking Gourd Chapbook Poetry Prize. Among other honors, has received fellowships from the Rona Jaffe Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council, New York Foundation for the Arts, and the Jerome Foundation. Is the 2023 Poet in Residence at Guggenheim Museum and is the winner of the 2023 Whiting Award. Okay, those are some very impressive bios, and now we get to hear from these very impressive poets. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Simon and Amma.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out to celebrate Master. I'm going to read some poems I thought might be in conversation with Simon's book. The first one is called The Rite of Spring in French. Anybody speak French? Okay, so I'm not going to say it. This piece actually is being performed at the Park Avenue Armory right now by an all-black African cast, but it's choreographed by Pina Bausch. It's really stunning. If you like dance, I would encourage you to get those last tickets before it closes. But this is an example of an ekphrastic poem, which is a poem that's about art. And I am a dancer, and Simon has lots of poems around martial arts, and I felt like this movement might be appropriate for tonight. The Rite of Spring. At this time of night, the theater is empty, draped in its velvet robes, echoing with ghosts and applause. I've been tossing and turning all night as headlights flash across the ceiling. Inside the ornate opera house, it felt close to midnight, bottomless like tonight, though it was the middle of the day when I arrived and the usher escorted me to my seat. An ocean of dirt covered the stage. The dancers performed underneath and on top of Stravinsky's score. With their bodies, they made another music, full of lunges, panting, slaps, stomps, and whatever sounds the body makes when it yields to unyielding earth. Men and women threw themselves on the floor and into each other, smearing their skins with dirt, violence, and sweat. I am restless. Tonight, I remember I vowed to feel as alive as the woman who, in a rite of spring, must dance herself to death. Hair frazzled, clothes soiled, the fated woman fell to the earth, then sprang back up, slashing the air and contracting her body as if she'd been punched repeatedly. She fell and danced, danced and fell, until she collapsed for the last time. The stage went black. How quickly I walked into the bright day, leaving her there behind me. On nights like this one, when I'm crazed by wakefulness and darkness sacrifices itself, anxious limb by anxious limb, into the day's endless mouth, I steal the red dress from the dead woman's body and dance wildly with such abandon. The room turns stained, swirling, terrible, pink. So this is another ekphrastic poem. It is after Romare Bearden collage. It's called Patchwork Quilt, but there's like another patchwork quilt. If you kind of Google or if you use the internet to search, you'll find that one. It's not that one. This one actually, yeah, it's hard to find on the internet, but it's in a book and it's from 1969. I decided to write about it because I had been reading a scholar who was saying that in the collage, there's a man kind of reaching, what she said was like taking off his shirt or putting on his shirt. And I thought he was reaching into his pocket. And so I made this Obad, which is a song like Romeo and Juliet, like lovers parting in the morning. My back is turned from him again, but this time I'm not hunched over the quilt, his rough thumbs gripping my waist. I'm standing in the middle of a room constructed with pencil, adhesive, and paper. 1 foot in the basin, I will scrub his cigarette hands and yellow eyes off my skin. I will clean my sex and start again. Another will come and I'll forget the coat hung gently on the hook. Different than the way he took me, he shook like a startled fish caught in a great blue heron's beak. Yes, a woman of my kind has seen the sea. The first time I gasped at its glistening mouth. Endlessly, the waves replace themselves. I launder my nakedness like a uniform with water from the pitcher. Soon, another will arrive who I will wash away. There is a man who dares to face me. He considers every angle. He built my form with precise lines and forged scraps of brown. From the harsh shape my elbow makes, the builder knows. This is a portrait of work, not pleasure. I love how softly he touches me, though all I want is to be left, to spend a morning in bed, alone with the images of dream. Okay, so I'm going to read one more poem from this book and then a newer work. I'm going to read On Seeing and Being Seen. I don't like being photographed. When we kissed at a wedding, the night grew long and luminous. You unhooked my bra. A photograph passes for proof, Sontag says, that a given thing has happened. Or you leaned back to watch as I eased the straps from my shoulders, hooks and eyes. Right now, my breasts are too tender to be touched. Their breasts were horrifying, Elizabeth Bishop writes. Tell her someone wanted to touch them. I am touching the photograph of my last seduction. It is as slick as a magazine page, as dark as a street darkened by rain. When I want to remember something beautiful, instead of taking a photograph, I close my eyes. I watched as you covered my nipple with your mouth. Desire made you beautiful. I closed my eyes. Tonight, I am alone in my tenderness. There is nothing in my hand except a certain grasping. In my mind's eye, I am stroking your hair with damp fingertips. This is exactly how it happened. On the lit up hotel bed, I remember thinking, my body is a lens I can look through with my mind. Thank you. Okay. So this is a poem that I wrote. I was like at a table with a bunch of men by chance, and kind of struck by the way that they were interacting. And much of Master is involved with masculinity. So I thought this newer poem would be in conversation. Table of Men. What I want from you 12 men has little to do with sex, though it, like wine and butter, rest on the table between us. Your sweat, like that of icy glass, your brute tongue, and all the exchanges of power and light. I'm not your mistress, mother, concubine, or slave. I want to dine with men whose kindness hasn't been beaten out, or who called it back like the one lost thing. Across the oak table, I want to see men whose humiliations have softened their eyes. I want the sky of your listening, azure, assured, birdless, and knowledge earned from attention. Without again looking, tell me the color of my eyes. All my life, I've studied you, a matter of survival. I want not to know you so well. I do not know you at all. I want to be surprised. There are a dozen violences whose hands have seized each of us. Here at this table is tenderness, broken so we might share it. All right. So I'm going to close with the words of endorsement that I had the pleasure of writing when I read Simon's book. I'm so excited to be here to celebrate this book, and I'm so excited to hear the poems in Simon's voice. So this is what I wrote. If you surrender to Simon Shieh's Master, if you let your eyes grow accustomed to its voluptuous and troubling dark, you will be rewarded with a singular reading experience, merciless in its vision and craft, dripping with muscularity and sweat. Shieh's thrilling debut will leave you breathless. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Amma. It means a lot to me to be here reading with Amma. I first met Amma in 2019 in Lisbon, and her friendship and her poems have really been a guiding light to me over the years. And so yeah, thank you, Amma, for being here with me. I'm going to read the first poem in the book, Kindness Comes Too Easily to Wicked Men. In every ballroom, he is the chandelier. No, he is the song that everyone only knows the chorus of. Beautiful, relentless. He dresses as a dead soldier every Halloween. In the army, he says, you are dirt under the nails of your country. My mother wants him dead. The family of a young girl wants him dead. In the pockets of his old fatigues, a torn zodiac and a rusted metal spoon. Never in my life did I believe I knew him. Once, in a fit of rage, he named every star in the sky after a dead man. Premature blessing. One night in a Taiwan hospital, a man cut my mother open and took my body out. Deliverance. Years later, she will tell me, we never remember the men who we cannot forget. He gave me a necklace of teeth. He laughs each time someone says the word God. Every day I guess his favorite color, and every day I get it wrong. Mercy, sweet throat, mercy, blackbird. He once wrote a song about me in the middle of the night. When I sing it, a black snake slithers from my mouth. I recently learned that Amma is or was a dancer, and it made a lot of sense to me. I think there is something to be said about movement and athleticism and writing. And I don't know what it is that is to be said about it, but I think there's something there. I definitely see it in her poems, in her writing. For me, I feel like a lot of these poems came more from my body than from anything else, and they felt like urgent. They felt necessary. I felt like there was a very physical catharsis to writing these poems down. This next poem is called "Every Scar is an Eye Which Has Seen Too Much." For him, I kept a fire burning in a glass cup. His secrets filled the air around him like smoke. Once he released 2 wounded fish back into the sea. It was like nothing I had ever seen. Red ribbons, red ribbons. He named them after his 2 sons. Practiced calling them back to shore after violent storms. Fish scale, full moon. Today I am his son, guilty, loyal. I feel his fingers searching for the soft hollow of my throat. He asks me where I've been all these years, says he doesn't even recognize me now. How long have you known, he asks, finally, and every scar on my body opens. Obsession. He tells me to arrive early. Perched in his throat, a raven soaked in warm milk. Finally, the sky dries into a painting. I sit on a drain pipe all morning. I am 14. I have achieved so little. The Rottweiler next door will not eat. Instead, it catches butterflies in its mouth and lets them go. School is out for Christmas. Boys walk the tree line in the distance, twirling axes. I press my palm into the snowy sidewalk. Stupid angel, I wonder who saved me. My hands are cowbells at the bottom of an ocean. Here I am, here I am. Does he even know my name? He calls me China boy, he calls me son. My first words to him are, morning, sir. It's true we take the good out of everything we name. Summers, I cut his grass, I paint his house black. No, I paint his house the same beige it was before. One day it rains, one day a hive of bees in his gutter makes me their king. He feeds me red meat, he watches the blood pool in my mouth, laughs at my red teeth. In his car he paints my thigh a deep purple when he tells a dirty joke. I pull laughter from my mouth like chicken bones. He tells me he had nothing to do with that girl, nothing. I don't ask. I bury my hands underneath my thighs. He names me after the glow of the full moon. I look away from the window. Slowly, I take the raven into my mouth. So, about half of this poem is set in upstate New York, where I first meet the master, and I have kind of this experience of unhealthy obsession with the master. And then the other half of this poem takes place in Beijing. And both of these, this whole book is concerned kind of tangentially with martial arts and the way martial arts has shaped my relationship with masculinity. And in Beijing, in China, I learned to see masculinity in a very different way because the way Chinese men perform masculinity is fundamentally different than they do in America. In China, men are very comfortable touching each other, and they're very tactile. And so that taught me, another way to be as a man. But I was also interacting with them a lot in a martial arts context. So we were, punching and kicking each other, and also hugging each other and stroking each other, even. So I'm going to read a poem called "Training in Yizhuang" about this experience with Chinese men that I think really taught me something. Too poor for Vaseline, they spread cooking oil on my nose and forehead. At first, I swear they want my face for themselves, as they study it every chance they get. They gamble money, porn from the Cultural Revolution, the village beauty melting iron pots down to scrap metal in a red bra and underwear. Nothing sacred here wants to be sacred anymore. Scars decorate their faces like arrow feathers. A sprinkling of incense ash seasons our white rice. Every night we wring the sweat out of our only shirts, list the names of men and what we did to them. In a fight, the question is never what, but how. How do you beat a man who refuses to rise from a puddle of his own blood? How do you protect yourself from another's hands with your own? My sparring partner lies back, dancing to his own music, waits for my hands to drop below my jaw. Some days they are gentle. Some days they leave me concussed, bloody. I stumble back to bed, lie on top of the sheets, dripping sweat. Somewhere, one of them staggers from bed to bed, blindfolded, naked, his arms and chest still wet from a shower, muscles like rain clouds before a storm. Hands stretched out before him, he laughs as he searches the room for my body. All right. How am I doing on time? All right, I think I'll just read one more poem. This poem is called Day One. Late at night, in my new home, I wake to the sound of rain falling through a hole in the roof. Still, I keep your things close by. An Alaskan knife, a blue vial of cologne. I dab it on my neck, the insides of my wrists. A fly mistakes me for bruised fruit. I breathe deep, walk outside to the water's edge, though I no longer believe what I see. That the severed hands drifting downriver are the same hands that once ran through my wet hair. In this new life, I ask nothing of you. A tree grows out of the carcass of a deer, its branches thrusting into the night like antlers. At your funeral, 3 women stood by as they buried you, though only one cried. Nobody loves the living like the dead. Your scent rises from my skin, gathers in my mouth like a storm. I exhale, my breath a rain cloud. My whole life, you treated me like a dream you would write down when you woke. And here we are. I lie beside your body in the tall grass. The wolf, tattooed on your chest, saunters onto mine, makes a bed of my torso and falls asleep. Its jaws hanging open, teeth brushing against my throat. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Oh, great. Thank you. How are y'all doing? Good? So stunning. It's really a beautiful collection. I completely understand why Terrence Hayes picked it. The kind of surreal, the imagery, the rain clouds. It's so beautiful. And then, I feel like you're doing something that's it's you're giving something, but it's not like the plain narrative. This is what happened. And there's something that's what poetry does. There's something more true in what I feel like you've done in this book. Okay. So my first question is about the relationship to the title Master and its literary antecedents. So specifically, I'm thinking about Emily Dickinson, who has the Master Letters, which, if you don't know, they were written between 1858 and 1861, and they express an intense love fraught with indecision and separation. And then Lucy Brock-Broido, who's a poet who wrote in response to those Dickinson Master Letters. So I wondered if your title's in conversation with these poets, and then if not, if you could just talk a little bit about like how many different ways and meanings master means to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alma. I really like that question. I was thinking about it on the way up here. And so I am aware of Lucy Brock-Broido's relationship to the Master Letters, and I really like the story. I don't know if it's true, but I think the story goes that Lucy didn't really like Emily Dickinson's poems, but she read the Master Letters and she was like, oh, I get this. This is like great. And I love that story because I love Emily Dickinson's letters. But I only found out about the Master Letters after I had kind of fixated on this word as a title. And reading Emily Dickinson's Master Letters later, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is it. This is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Because I think she's speaking to and addressing an individual, but also kind of beyond the individual. And that's really what I'm trying to do here. This book is about the master refers to like a flesh and blood person, but it also transcends that person. It goes beyond that person. And that's very important to me because it's not really about my life. It's not strictly autobiographical. It's more about the process of writing through this. And back to this word master, what I love about master, I think this word is exemplary of language in the way that I'm trying to in the way that I'm trying to use it in these poems. And what I mean by that is I think that our normal everyday relationship to language is one of we think about language as something that we use as a tool, right? Something that we use to conform to or something that is at our disposal, and we don't think about language as something that uses us. And I wanted the title of this book to be a word that represents how language can create something out of nothing, and how language can makes real things happen, like material things happen. And I like this word master because master creates between two people where no relationship exists. It creates division, it creates power, and it's the origin of violence because of that. And I think that that's true of all language. I think that violence originates in language, and I think language is so powerful for that, and I don't want to take that kind of function of language for granted. And so I guess with these poems, I'm trying to make that come to the forefront of the poems. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping that word master does, is it makes evident the power of language to make something out of nothing. Mm-hmm. I hope that makes sense.
It does, yeah. I mean, it makes me, yeah. I mean, I really love the idea of language using us. There's a lot to think about. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, Simon has been very generous in trying to make this like a dialogue. Although we're here to celebrate this book. So Simon has a question for me.
I do. So, because I love your book so much, and I've been wanting to talk to you about it ever since I read it. So, so something that's kind of at the forefront of my mind when I read your book was the relationship of the art maker to their art, and also how desire fits into that. And I feel like throughout history, the artist has pretended to, or I guess in maybe some cultural canons, the artist has pretended to repress their desire in relation to the thing that they're depicting, and they're pretending to just express an idea through it rather than their own individual desire. And I feel like you bring desire into the room of your poems and into the relationship between artist and object or subject. And yeah, I was wondering if that reading resonates with you, and if you could speak more to that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not just desire, but I think desire is one of the things that makes it's a life force, right? The kind of erotic force that Audre Lorde talks about, but it makes a thing not a thing. So if you're trying to, in your gaze, like make me an object, my desire makes me a subject. So yeah, I think there's something about the wanting, and there's probably other things too, that makes us human and makes me impossibly not a thing, even in the context of like racialized slavery, when you are like quote unquote owned by another person. There's something about when we can tell stories, or like we can hear what was true, which was that people were human and they had desires, that makes them human. Like it's something that's like a human thing. So from that to, a painter painting someone, to just like the white gaze in general, like thinking about all these different layers of it, I feel like there's something animating about desire. And so when I was thinking about trying to make a space for the Black feminine nude that felt both personal and historical, to find some kind of roots to freedom, that feels like desire is like a central propelling force in that quest.
I love that. Yeah, desire is what makes us human.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question? Because I'm very curious about your ekphrastic work, and how, like why does a work of art make you want to write a poem? Why does this work of art make you want to write a poem rather than this work of art?
Yeah, it's a little inexplicable. Sometimes I'll go to a museum specifically to look at a piece that I think is going to be something I'll write about, and then it just doesn't. It's not. It's like, it's an experience into itself, but it's not something that I want to write about. I don't know what that is. Like, I can't really name it, but it's really a spark that comes. And the way I've thought about it is like, it's a way for me to prolong the experience, to like be with it in a different way and for a longer period of time. So inexplicable, but there is something that is unnameable that kind of happens inside of me that I feel like I'm like, oh, okay. And usually if I follow the thread, the poem comes. Another question for you. Okay, so this is your debut book, and I found with my debut collection, there's just like a lot that I learned from other people, from readers and listeners. So I'm wondering, so far, what have been the things that like stand out for you in terms of affirmation, or like, aha, or I didn't really think about it that way, or resonances? Like, what's a couple things that feel like you've learned in the process of sharing Master with its audience?
Yeah, something that kind of surprised me was a lot of people said that they like read it in one sitting, or otherwise like read it very quickly, and that was not something I anticipated because I don't typically read books of poetry like that. I typically kind of take my time with them. So yeah, the fact that people said that they read it quickly and they felt like it was a little bit almost novelistic, or there was some kind of plot that was, or momentum that was kind of driving them through the reading. That's very heartening to hear. And it's not something I anticipated, but cool. Yeah.
You crafted it very well.
Thank you.
It is thrilling. I use that word. And then maybe, I mean, my last question is just about, like, we have a poet friendship, and I honestly think more than anyone, like, we are really sharing our reading lives with each other. So I wondered, poetry specifically, because I actually haven't been reading a lot of 2023 poetry, but I'm wondering if there's some recent poetry readings that come to mind as recommendations.
Did you say you have been reading or haven't?
I haven't. Not
Okay.
like not a lot. Like I think
Yeah.
maybe in January I'll kind of go back to 2023 poetry, and I've been reading other poetry, but not like that's come out this year, not as much. So wondering, it doesn't have to be specific to this year, but if you have any poetry recommendations for me.
Yeah, I've been reading people that I've been reading with and talking with, like, in the real world. And Leslie Saines' book, Have You Been Long Enough at Table, is really excellent. Terrence Hayes' book of essays is really great. I can't remember the title because he released 2 books at the same time, one poetry.
Watch Your Language.
Watch Your Language. Okay. Yeah, that's excellent. He has a really great essay in there about going to a Chinese poetry conference, and that, like, when I read that, I was like, I've been to a very similar Chinese poetry conference. And then, yeah, I've also been trying to read a lot more Chinese poets. Right now I'm reading a book of poems by Yang Mu, who is a Taiwanese poet, and trying to just read more Chinese poets in English translation, and maybe like you, I'm not reading a whole lot of other 2023 books. I feel like I'm trying to, like, change the way I read. I think before I was really interested in, like, people who were releasing first books, like, contemporary with me, because I was interested in the conversation that I was kind of contributing to. But now I think I'm trying to be a little bit more sporadic and surprise myself a little bit and challenge myself also in my reading. And yeah, but what about you? What are you reading these days?
Well, I brought what I'm reading, actually. Let's see. So this book is called Conversations with Toni Cade Bambara. It's edited by Tabitha Lewis. Tabitha Lewis. And I don't know if you ever feel this way, but, like, I'm on the verge of an obsession. Yeah. So when I feel that way, I then, like, I'm not going to read I don't think I'm going to read all of Toni Cade Bambara's fiction, because some of it is kind of heavy and I don't know if I can make it through that. But I am really interested in seeing if I can find some poems and maybe some plays, and just know a little bit more about who she was in the world. She wrote The Salt Eaters. I think it's either These or Those Bones Are Not My Children. She was a contemporary with Toni Morrison, and edited by Toni Morrison. Edited in 1970 the Black Woman Anthology. So that's just a little bit about her. But that's what I'm reading at the moment.
That's awesome.
I did actually have one more question, which is about your last name, because in my head I've been saying Shieh, because I remember you saying it's an anglicized version of Xie.
Yeah.
And I pronounced Jenny Shieh's name Shieh.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
But you said Shay. So then I'm wondering, I don't know, is there one pronunciation for your name, or is there maybe like a family thing, like this side of the family does it this way, this side of the family does it the other way? Like,
no, it's up for interpretation.
Okay.
My parents recently started I think pronouncing it Shieh, which I like. That's how you pronounce it in Chinese. When my grandfather came here, they the they I don't know who, but whoever is in charge of changing people's names changed it to Shay, and so that's how I say it. Maybe I'll change it, but yeah, my name's up for interpretation, which is kind of fun. I like that. I like that my name's up for interpretation.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. I think we can open up for questions. Do y'all have any questions for one of us or both of us? Or yeah.
Thanks so much, both of you, for reading tonight. Question, I love what you were saying about the body and sort of that undefinable relationship with language. In your work, it feels sometimes like it's able to swing between intimacy and violence, or the threat of violence, and which is a frightening relationship, but you seem to sort of navigate it pretty seamlessly. I was wondering, was that a relationship that you, I don't know, were conscious of as you were writing? Did it sort of emerge as these poems were coming out?
That's a great question. I'm going to add that to the list of things that people have helped me discover about the poems.
Can you repeat the question?
Right, I need to repeat the question. So the question is about the relationship between intimacy and violence, and to what extent I was aware of that relationship in writing the poems. And I became aware of it. I know exactly when I became aware of it, because it was after I'd read Jericho Brown's book, The New Testament. And first of all, the cover, right, is an image of one man bending over another man and shaving him. But at the moment that the painter depicted it, he could have been shaving him, or he could have been cutting his throat. And the poems in that book are very much interested in the relationship between intimacy and violence. And I think there's a long history, especially in gay male literature, of that relationship between intimacy and violence. So I was kind of inspired by that and thinking about that, because the relationship of the I in the book to the master figure is not one of intimacy, but it's one of obsession, admiration, and intimacy is kind of I guess occurs in more physical ways because of the nature of martial arts, and us having our bodies all over each other, and it's not intimate, but it appears intimate. And I think that's another layer to what's happening, the appearance of intimacy without intimacy. So yeah, it's something that I did kind of become aware of through Jericho Brown's work. Yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Alma, and thank you, Simon, for sharing such phenomenal pieces of poetry with us tonight. Whenever I go to a poetry reading, I think a lot about like the sonic quality of a poem, and I was hoping that the two of you could maybe speak a little bit more about the inspiration between of the sonic quality. You know how like a poem can be, I don't know, orational or like operatic or whatever. There are many ways in which to deliver a poem, and I wondered if since the both of you have relationships with movement, if the fluidity of movement also goes hand in hand with the ways in which you speak the poem out loud as well.
Yeah, that's so good. A question about the sonic quality of reading poems out loud in a space, and also about physicality and movement, and if that comes to play with both of our movement backgrounds. I think I just was thinking about the fact that when I danced, it felt, maybe to this day would feel more easy than like acting, like speaking lines. Maybe it's just because I was trained that way, but it feels like somehow closer to the root of myself. But I feel that way when I'm reading poems too. And I think that's because I'm not thinking of them as like performance. I try to just share. That's like the word that I'm constantly coming back to, either when I'm like thinking about like selling the book. I'm thinking about like just sharing the book. I just would like thoughtful readers. So when I'm reading from my book or reading a poem, like I'm just thinking about sharing it, and that feels very like in the normal mundane quotidian, as opposed to like performing the poem. And it feels more aligned with dancing to me than it does with like being on a stage and acting, which is interesting. I had never thought about that before. Yeah, does that feel like a good? Okay. Simon.
I like that. That makes me think of like movement being true to who you are, movement feeling like very the most maybe pure expression of who you are. I definitely understand that in terms of movement, but I also think I understand that in terms of language, like you were saying, reading poems. But I also think because language and stories shape who we are. And I think that, as much as I would like to be like this pure, like force of being that can only be expressed abstractly in music and in movement, I think the reality is that I am also shaped by language and shaped by words, and so I'm trying to kind of bring that out in the poems and find the language that that sits most close to who I am and what has shaped me. And I think that comes back to master and the role of language in shaping us from the inside out. But yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about audience when you're writing, and maybe, and I guess this question could go for both of you, but when you were writing this book, did you have a particular person, a particular audience in mind? Does that shape the way you write, what you write? And I know for myself, I'm not a professional writer, but whenever I'm writing something, I'm always thinking about who's reading this and how's this going to hit them. And just wondering if there was a particular target in terms of some of the poetry that you created.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, to what extent are we thinking about audience when we write? And it's a hard question. I want to say I don't think about audience, but I definitely think about somebody reading the poems. And I think it could be our mutual friend Taylor has said that he writes for poetry, and I really like that. I think that I wrote this book for poetry. I think that maybe some people would like me to say that I wrote this book for young men, but I don't think I did. I think I think it is really more for poetry, and I think that I hope that young men will read it and discover something about masculinity that would be great. But I do think I am writing for people who love to read poetry. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good question. What about you, Amma?
Okay, because I have another. I will answer the question, but I have another question for you. So, when you're writing these poems that no one asked you to write, are you thinking that this will be a book, or are you writing these poems just like I'm writing poems?
I wrote with the book in mind. Yeah, I had the book in mind very early on, and that really helped me to conceptualize the project. And I actually wrote this as prose before they were poems, and I wrote it as prose that was very true to life. And then I looked at it and I was like, this is boring, and this isn't teaching me anything. And so I took that experience of writing it out as prose, and I used that to write the poems. That's why I say this is about writing. It's not about something that happened, because it's not. Like if I just wrote out the facts, it would be a pretty boring reading experience. But yeah.
I think that's a good answer. That's beautiful. I didn't know all those things. I will just say that I write for myself, and maybe at a certain point when I'm thinking about, I mean, I've only have this one book. I mean, I have a chapbook, but so maybe later down the line, I'm like, okay, this is a thing. And then I'm thinking about audience, and that inflects like how I'm revising or something. But if I was thinking about other people besides me while I was writing, I don't think I would be writing what I was writing. I would be like censoring myself, and it wouldn't be good. So for me, my first audience is me. And then like who I hope reads the book is like a completely different answer, which is like everyone who loves poems, young women, black people, black women, etc., people who love art. But yeah, I need to be my own audience for me to feel like I want to write something that's meaningful, and sometimes that means transgressive or like taboo or a story that no one wants me to tell, whatever. Like I want to be free to do that, and one way of me being free to do that is to just think about like myself and not who's going to read this poem, because that might shut it down for me. Okay. Seems like we're winding into a nice place to end. All right. Thank y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Congratulations, Simon.
Thank you, Amma. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you, of course, to Amma for moderating such a fantastic conversation and for reading those gorgeous poems to start out with, and to Simon for celebrating such a wonderful debut launch with us. All right. So just a few reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the YouTube live stream, you can buy a copy of Master by clicking the link in the live stream description. For those of you with us tonight, we have plenty of additional copies available for purchase, as well as a few signed copies of Amma's collection, Bluest Nude, which is absolutely gorgeous. So if there are any poetry lovers in your lives, these would make fantastic gifts. Simon will be around to sign and personalize your books. That's going to happen at the little area, alcove, where my coworker Christina is now pointing to. We ask that you just gather your personal belongings, line up down this center aisle, more or less, and curve around to the wall. I believe that's it. Let's give these two one last round of applause. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you both.
Thank you, Amali and Books Are Magic, for hosting this wonderful reading, and all of you for coming.
Yes, I echo that. Thank you.